The mud of the forbidden forest tasted like copper and rotting leaves, a flavor Elias Thorne had become intimately familiar with over the last 72 hours. He lay pressed into the root system of a massive ancient oak, his chest heaving against the damp moss, trying to silence the wheezing rattle in his lungs. His right leg was numb from a stunner that had grazed his thigh 2 hours ago, and his left arm was screaming in agony, sliced open by a curse meant to sever the limb entirely. But he was alive, and he was counting. 5 down, 2 to go. Elias gripped the object in his hand. It didn't look like a weapon. It looked like something you would kick into a hearth to keep a fire going on a cold Tuesday. It was thick, knobby, asymmetrical, and darker than dried blood. A hunk of wood that refused to be polished, purchased from a dusty bin in Nocturne Alley for 3 sickles because no wandmaker in Diagon Alley would look at him. They called it the Firewood. His classmates in Hufflepuff laughed when it sputtered sparks that smelled like burnt hair. Professor Flitwick had gently suggested he might be better suited for herbology than charms, considering the wand refused to perform a simple levitation charm without vibrating so hard it numbed Elias's fingers. It was a joke, a mistake, a piece of trash. And right now, it was the only reason 5 Death Eaters were bound in vines and sinking into the peat bogs a mile south of the castle. A twig snapped. The sound was sharper than a whip crack in the heavy, humid air. Elias stopped breathing. The forest was unnaturally quiet, the usual chittering of acromantulas and centaurs silenced by the dark presence hunting among the trees. The air was thick with protective wards that had been shattered and the ozone stench of dark magic. They were close, the last 2. They were the elite, the ones who didn't stumble in the dark. He could feel the vibration starting in his hand again. The firewood wasn't humming with the light, airy resonance of unicorn hair or the fierce heat of dragon heartstring. It thrummed with a low, heavy pulse, like a heartbeat buried 6 feet underground. It liked the dirt. It liked the dark. It liked the forest. If you want to know how this forgotten wizard turned a piece of refuse into Hogwarts' most terrifying defense, stay with me until the end of this story. It had started 3 nights ago. A breach in the perimeter, silent and surgical. A cell of 7 Death Eaters, not looking for a fight, but looking for hostages. Students from influential families who had wandered too close to the forest edge. The alarm hadn't triggered. The sleek, polished wands of the prefects on patrol had failed them. The damp, chaotic magic of the Forbidden Forest scrambled delicate spellwork. A stupefy cast here drifted wide in the heavy mist. A shield charm shattered under the weight of the ancient wild magic that permeated the trees. Elias had been out there gathering ingredients for Sprout, breaking curfew because he couldn't afford to buy his own supplies. He had seen them take the first student, a Ravenclaw prefect. He had raised his ugly, knotted wand, his hand shaking, knowing that if he tried a disarming charm, the wand would likely just cough out a cloud of grey smoke. But then he had tripped, driving the tip of the firewood into the wet soil, and the earth had answered. He hadn't cast a spell, he hadn't spoken an incantation. The magic hadn't come from him, it had come through him. The roots of a nearby hawthorn had exploded upward, not with the precision of a transfiguration spell, but with the violent, thrashing hunger of nature itself. The root had wrapped around the lead Death Eater's ankle and snapped it like a dry twig. That was the secret. That was the joke. His wand was trash at casting magic into the air, but it was a masterwork at pulling magic out of the ground. Back in the present, the silence broke. "Come out, boy," a voice sneered, echoing from everywhere and nowhere. It was a voice like grinding stones. "We know you're hurt. We know you're alone. Your little tricks won't work on us. We aren't the recruits you picked off in the swamp." Elias closed his eyes. He felt the heavy thrum of the wand. He didn't need to aim. He didn't need line of sight. He needed contact. He dug the tip of the wand into the bark of the oak tree he was hiding behind. He didn't visualize a spell. He visualized the network of roots stretching out beneath the forest floor, a tangled web of wood and water, connecting every living thing in the acre. He felt the pulse of the tree. It was angry. The dark magic used by the intruders tasted like poison to the wood. He pushed his will into the wand. Find them. 30 yards away, to his left, 2 distinct pressures on the root system. Heavy boots. Elias whispered, "Snare." It wasn't a Latin incantation. It was a request. 70 feet away, the ground erupted. He heard a shout of surprise, followed by the distinct sound of a reducto curse blasting wood apart. They were fast. They had blown the roots to pieces before the wood could hold them. "There!" the voice screamed. A jet of green light scythed through the darkness, missing Elias's head by inches. It struck the oak, blowing a chunk of bark the size of a shield into the night. Elias rolled, scrambling through the mud. He didn't fire back. He couldn't. A standard stunning spell from this wand would travel 10 feet and fizzle. He had to get close to something living. He dove behind a mossy boulder as another curse shattered the space he had just occupied. Stone fragments rained down on his back. "He's got no range," the second voice yelled, breathless. "He's using the trees! Burn them!" Elias's stomach dropped. They were adapting. A wave of searing heat washed over the clearing. The Death Eaters were casting incendio, not at him, but at the forest itself. The damp wood hissed and popped, steam rising in blinding clouds, but the magical fire caught. The shadows retreated as orange light flickered, illuminating Elias's hiding spot. He was cornered. He had 0 offensive spells that could cross the gap. He had a wand that was essentially a glorified stick, and 2 killers closing in with military precision, burning his cover to ash. He looked at the wand. It was warm, almost hot to the touch. It wasn't failing. It was furious. This is the moment where most would break, where the mockery of 5 years of schooling would crash down, confirming that he was indeed useless, a wizard with a broken tool. But Elias remembered the look on the Ravenclaw prefect's face when the first Death Eater fell. It wasn't hope, it was confusion. They couldn't understand how the boy with the Firewood wand was doing it. If this forgotten legend of Hogwarts is already touching your heart, and you'd like to help keep these stories alive, you can support the channel by clicking the thanks button below the video. Every little bit helps me continue bringing you more hidden tales of courage and magic. Elias gripped the wand with both hands. He couldn't stop the fire, but fire needed air. He slammed the wand into the mud at the base of the boulder. He didn't ask for roots this time. He asked for the water table. He poured every ounce of his fear, his anger, and his stubborn Hufflepuff loyalty into the wood. Rise. The ground beneath the Death Eaters didn't crack, it liquefied. The tactical shift was instantaneous. The solid earth turned into a churning slurry of mud and swamp water. The Death Eaters, poised to advance, suddenly dropped waist-deep into the forest floor. The magical fire they were casting sputtered as the mud splashed up, coating them, choking the flames. Movement restricted, Elias whispered to himself, acting as his own spotter. Target mobility, 0. He broke cover. He ran not away from them, but toward them. It was suicide. It was ridiculous. A student charging 2 dark wizards with a stick. The first Death Eater, buried to his stomach in quicksand-like mud, raised his wand. Avada! Elias didn't cast a spell. He swung his wand like a bat, striking a low-hanging branch of a willow tree as he passed it. The connection was instant. The impact transferred from his wand through the tree and whipped a thick, wet vine out of the darkness like a constrictor snake. It slapped the Death Eater's wand hand aside a millisecond before the green light erupted, sending the killing curse harmlessly into the canopy. The vine wrapped around the man's throat, silencing him. One left, the leader. He had managed to levitate himself halfway out of the mud, hovering just above the grasp of the earth. He was snarling, his mask gone, revealing a face scarred by years of dark duels. He pointed his wand directly at Elias, who was now standing in the open, chest heaving 10 feet away. "You filthy little scavenger," the leader spat. "You think mud defeats magic?" He began the motion for a blasting curse that would turn Elias into red mist. Elias knew he couldn't dodge, he couldn't shield. His wand didn't do shields. He looked at the leader. "It's not mud," Elias panted. "It's Hogwarts." Elias threw his wand. He didn't cast with it. He physically threw the hunk of knotted wood at the Death Eater. It was the clumsiest, most pathetic move in dueling history. The leader laughed, easily batting the wood aside with a lazy flick of his own wand. Pathetic! The firewood wand spun in the air and landed in the mud directly beneath the hovering Death Eater. Elias smiled. Connect! The wand wasn't in his hand, but it was still his. And now it was touching the deep earth directly below the enemy. The reaction was violent. A shock wave of raw earthen magic exploded upward from the wand. It wasn't a spell. It was a discharge of all the energy the forest had been holding back. A pillar of solid stone and root erupted from the mud, catching the hovering Death Eater and launching him 20 feet into the air before slamming him back down into the mire with bone-crushing force. The impact knocked Elias off his feet. He lay in the mud, staring up at the sky as the rain began to fall again, extinguishing the last of the magical fires. Silence returned to the forest. It took 20 minutes for the adrenaline to fade, replaced by the cold shock of blood loss. Elias crawled over to where his wand lay half buried in the muck. He wiped it off on his robes. It looked uglier than ever. The wood was scorched, the knots were caked in clay, and the tip was splintered. He sat there, guarding the unconscious bodies of the intruders, shivering uncontrollably until the lights of the professors appeared in the distance. When Professor McGonagall arrived, led by the terrified students Elias had sent running hours ago, she found a scene of carnage. The forest looked like a war zone. 7 Death Eaters, seasoned killers, were trussed up in vines, buried in earth, or knocked cold by swinging branches. And in the middle of it sat Elias Thorne, holding a piece of firewood. McGonagall looked at the trapped dark wizards, then at the boy. She lowered her wand, her stern face softening into something resembling awe. She looked at the useless wand in his hand, seeing the faint pulse of green light still throbbing within the wood. "Mr. Thorne," she said quietly, her voice cutting through the wind, "it seems we owe you and your wand an apology." Elias didn't have the strength to answer. He just held the wood tighter. It was warm. It was steady. The official report would simply say that the intruders were apprehended due to environmental factors. The other students would still whisper that Elias's wand was a joke. That he had just gotten lucky, that the forest had done the work for him. He would never be a dueling champion. He would never win a trophy for charms. But that night, as he was levitated onto a stretcher, Elias watched the trees sway as if waving goodbye. He knew the truth. Magic wasn't just about Latin words and clean sparks. Sometimes magic was dirty, heavy, and brutal. And sometimes the tool that everyone mocks is the only one strong enough to hold the line when the world falls apart. If this forgotten legend of Hogwarts touched your heart, tell me in the comments. What would you have done in Elias's place? Like the video, share it with another Harry Potter fan, and subscribe to hear more hidden stories of courage, magic, and impossible odds. Sometimes the strongest magic doesn't look like magic at all.